Hey guys, Anthony from Go Industrial here. Thank you for your purchase and welcome to your brand new 200HS with pressurized bead system and LazerGuide 3000. We're going to run through the basics of the unit, what's included in the package, and then also how to set up and how to operate some of the features. We're going to go over some of the tips, and we're also going to go over some of the basic maintenance and troubleshooting aspects. So we'll start off with what's included with the unit. So some basic identifiable features with the 200HS is the petrol motor, the hydraulic motor, and then also the hydraulic pump and piston pump. What does HS stand for? Hydraulic system. Why would you want a hydraulic system? It's because the hydraulic motor offers a more consistent spray pattern and it strokes the piston pump slower, leading to longer life on your piston pump. It does require a little bit more maintenance in terms of replacing fluids. However, you will get a lot longer life out of your equipment. The Honda GX200 motor. This section is your hydraulic pump that's powered by the fan belt. This fan belt and hydraulic motor is also used to power the compressor, which runs the pressurized bead system. You've got your air tank, which is fed by the compressor. You've got your release valve and also your air regulator, and this is where your bead tank is. When you're opening this and you're filling the bead, you want to make sure that you release the air from the tank by using this valve here. That'll ensure that there's no pressure in the tank and the lid won't bust open when you open this chamber. This is your paint tank. You can either use the drum that's included with the unit or you can use the paint drums directly as they come. Always ensure that you mix your paint before you suction it up. You've got your suction tube and your drain tube. On this side over here, we've got our hydraulic pump, which is fed by the motor, and this powers our piston pump here. You've also got this clever little valve here that opens the hydraulic pump to the piston pump, allowing the pump to stroke. Close it when it's not in operation. We've got our prime valve here. Facing downwards will cycle paint through the drain tube and back into your paint pail. When you want to spray, flick it upwards into spray, and that'll start to build pressure in the gun lines. In this system, you have two guns, gun 1 and gun 2. Both are connected to the pressurized bead system, as you can see here. We can adjust our gun arms very easily using this screw here. We can slide out and then we want to lock it off. And using these ones under each gun arm, we can adjust them on the rail. There's very handy measurements here. You can see the big lines, they represent 50 mil, and the small one in between represents 25 mil. So without needing a tape measure, we can quickly know the distances between our guns. If we need to adjust the guns in or out, we can do that with this lever here. And if we need to adjust the height, we can do that with this one here. Again, you'll also see grooves which indicate 50 mil measurements and are included on both lines. You can also adjust these on angles, like so, if you're spraying different radiuses or different angles. Adjusting the fan widths on our bead guns is also really easy. Underneath the guns themselves, there's two prongs, and squeezing them in on both sides will increase and decrease the fan width of the bead. So that way you can squeeze them in and that'll have a narrower fan of bead. You can also run the gun arm off the back steer right here, and that'll give you a lot of stability running over the center of the axle. It'll also allow you to spray a wider fan width because you're not running over the spray line with the wheel if you're spraying extra wide. You've also got the Easy Line wheel system. That'll allow the wheel to lock straight, but if you set the wheel to an angle, you can screw in this lever here, and that'll allow it to lock at a certain angle. For example, I pull in my lever, I adjust the wheel to a certain angle, I screw in this screw, and now it'll be locked at that angle, and I can spray perfect circles. Unscrewing it, I can then lock my wheel back straight. An additional accessory that you have with your unit is the LazerGuide 3000. This is a high-powered dot laser and will ensure that you get nice straight lines. On our control board, you've got some identifiable features. You've got the pressure dial, which rotates clockwise to turn the pressure up. You've also got our engine speed lever, which increases engine speed. This is our e-stop. Holding this down will kill the motor. And then we've got our functionality here, which will run through on startup. We've also got some buttons here. This will control your laser, and this will control the automatic features of the guns. We have a lever underneath which will pull to activate the front wheel, unlocking it and allowing the unit to rotate. Letting go of the lever and pushing will lock the unit straight again. And then our lever on the right here activates our gun lines manually. So there's a few safety things to identify before we operate the unit. The main risk is skin injection. These are a high pressure unit, and if you put your hand in front of the guards when operating and you get basically paint injected into your skin or water injected into your skin, it's a very serious matter and you want to go straight to the hospital. So how do we avoid skin injection? Well, there's a couple of ways to do it, and the first is to make sure that whenever we're touching the guns or dealing with the tips, that we don't have any pressure in the line. There's a couple of ways we can evacuate that pressure. One is by releasing it manually through the guns. This is the safest way to do it and also the best way to do it in terms of longevity out of your machine. There is also this release valve here, which if you spin down into the prime position, will release pressure back into your paint tube. That'll remove all pressure from the guns and allow you to safely change your tips and also handle your guns. Whenever you're handling the guns, make sure that the trigger lock is engaged so that way the trigger can't be pulled. Remember, you might know that the unit's under pressure, but your co-workers might not. So if you're changing tips and someone comes over to move the unit or just rest on it, they might accidentally pull the trigger, and that could be a risk of skin injection. So ensure that whenever you're dealing with this or you leave the unit unattended, that there's no pressure in the lines. So a couple of other small things to note is there are a few hot points. They are all identified on the unit, so don't touch them when the unit is on because you will burn yourself. That goes for the motor, it goes for the hydraulic motor, and it also goes for the hydraulic pump. So don't rest here because that will hurt. Another thing to note as well is when you're not operating the unit, make sure that you have the brake lever engaged, and this will stop the unit from rolling. If you're on an incline or a hill, there is the risk that you'll let go of the unit and it might run someone down. It's also worth noting some of the moving parts and the pinch hazards. Obviously in our fan belt, these are all guarded off, but it is still a risk if you get your fingers in there. You also have the piston pump stroking up and down, and you can see here these are indicated as pinch point risks, so make sure that you're not putting your hands in here when the pump is operating. The last thing to note is the bead tank. We covered it off before, but make sure you evacuate all the pressure from the tank before opening this, because if you open it under pressure, it will burst open and that could hit you, bead could go everywhere, it could be a pretty serious risk as well. Another key thing to note is don't point the laser in anyone's eye. If you are operating it, make sure that people are aware and that you have it aimed at the ground and not into people's faces or at planes. There's two types of tips you'll use. One are the yellow LineLazer tips. These are for your single lines and they're designed to have a nice clean edge. The second are your Rack 5 black tips. These are designed to have a soft edge and are much better when you're overlapping multiple spray fans to make one larger line or when you're stenciling. The tips that are included with the package are the 319 and the 421. Your 319s, generally speaking, will be good for a 100mm line. Your 421s, generally speaking, will be good for a 150mm line. You can control the width of the line with the tips depending on the height. So at 150mm from the ground, your 319 tip will be a 100mm line, and at 200mm, it'll be a 150mm line. That's the same for your 421s. At the smallest point, it'll be a 150mm line, and at its largest point, it'll be a 200mm line. If you look here, you'll see a tip chart that has a guide on the different tip sizes, fan widths, and flow rate for the different tips. When installing our tip guards, there's three parts. We've got the tip guard itself, which will be your orange tip guard. This is your Rack 5 tip guard. We've got the one seal, which is actually two parts, and we've got the tip itself. This is a yellow LineLazer tip. It's a heavy edge tip, and it's designed to spray clean lines on the road for single line use. A couple of features of the tip: when facing this way, that's in spray. If you flip it around, you can actually shoot a jet, which will clear any blockages. These are referred to as reverser clean. When installing your one seals, you can put them on the back of your tips, like so, line them up like this, and press them in the back here. This will ensure that you're not getting any leakage or spillage from here. We can now screw these on, ensuring that the unit is not pressurized. The tip guards are designed to be screwed on at hand tight, and this is enabled through the soft black seal. Remember, arrow to the ground for spray, flip it around, it'll shoot a jet, and that'll clear any blockages. So we're going to run through the startup process, and there's a few points to note when we start it up. Firstly, you want to make sure that the motor is turned on, you want to make sure that the fuel is on, and you want to make sure that the choke is engaged. You also want to make sure that your hydraulic pump is off, which is down in this position, that the pressure dial is wound back so we don't get pressure in the unit straight away, and that the prime valve is facing downwards. Once we've confirmed that this is the case, we can then pull start the unit. Engage the choke, and now we can increase the RPM. The next thing we'll want to do is open the valve to engage the piston pump. You'll hear that start stroking straight away, and now we know that paint should be priming through the unit and cycling from the suction tube into the pump, through the manifold, and then out the drain tube. We can increase our pressure a little bit, and you'll hear that pump speed up. Flicking the prime valve up, we can engage spray. And you'll hear that pump stall, and we call that stalling under pressure. You can see here indicated on our display that we have 320 psi, and if we increase that, you'll hear the pump run and that build. When we pull the gun trigger, controlling the pressure on our bead tank, pulling this lever out will allow us to adjust this dial down. We can release air from the tank by pulling this, and then we can slowly build it up to the desired level. There's an excellent guide that tells you what PSI you should have depending on the amount of bead you want to lay and how wide you want to lay it. We'll put that here, but we'll also send it to you as well. Operating our laser, we want to turn the switch on, wait for the lights to come on, and when they stop flashing, you'll be ready to press the button and turn on the laser. If we want to adjust the laser out, we can do it at this control here and pull it out to line up where we want. We can adjust this here as well, and you can set the angle with this nut. You can now see the laser is on. The display is a really simple system, and we'll run you through how that works. This is what's known as your home page, where it has all the information that you need displayed while operating the unit. You can see here PSI, the PSI of the unit. You can see here liters dispensed. You can see here if there is a battery issue. You can also see the amount of distance that you've traveled on a set job, and you can download these job profiles as well using the JLog system. You can also set the line width that you're achieving and the color. So if I'm spraying wide paint at a 100mm line, then I know that these measurements are going to be more accurate. I can use this data to report on usage or to help quote as well. You'll also see at the top here, you've got these 3 indicators. These are your 3 presets, and these can be programmed for different skip line functions. You've also got this section here, which indicates if you're doing a solid line or a skip line, and you've also got this function here, which switches between A for automatic, M for manual, and S for single. If you want to reset these, you simply hold this button here, and that'll reset the trip. If you want to save these, you can start recording, or you can view your jobs. And you can see here the data that we talked about before. Using this function here, you can transfer it across. Returning home. Cycling through the menu is also quite easy. Think of the measure mode as a fancy tape measure. You can use it to measure the perimeter of an area, and you can store up to 6 measurements. Simply press this button to start the function. You can walk it. You'll see distance recorded. Press it again to set it. Then if I want to record another measurement, this can be a really useful function if you're trying to measure out a certain square meterage in order to break down how many car parks you need, or what the pricing would be based on the literage of paint that you think you will use. And you can reset that again by holding this function. We have the layout mode. This allows you to basically spray a spot line when you press the button. You can change the size of this as well, and it'll just increase the amount of paint that's outputted. What this does is it sprays a spot on the ground, and you can set the distance at how often it sprays it. For example, if I want to spray a dot every 2.7 meters to indicate where I should be doing my car park lines. I can press this function to spray, walk at 2.7 meters and it'll spray again. Walk at another 2.7 meters, it'll spray again, so on and so forth, until I press the button again to stop it. The next screen is your settings. You've got your calibration. You don't need to worry about this. We calibrate it here at the factory, and if you do need to recalibrate for whatever reason, that information is included in the manual. You've got your settings, where it covers off your unit type, time and date, units, contrast adjustment, gun adjustments, and you've also got your language here and your marker mode. Back to the home page, you've also got these two indicators here. This is gun 1 and this is gun 2. If I want to spray a solid line with gun 1, I simply press this button once and the red light will come on. If I want to spray a solid line with both gun 1 and gun 2, I press both and both will come on. If I want to spray a solid line with gun 1 and a skip line with gun 2, then I hold, and you'll see that gun 1 turned off, and that's because I'm in single. If I change that back to automatic or manual, I can then add a solid line in gun 1 and a skip line on gun 2. Same for gun 1, if I hold, I can have 2 skip lines, or I can have 1 skip line and 1 solid line. You'll see when we press these that these indicators come up here. Very simply, the top one measures the length of the line that you are spraying. In this case, it's 600 mil of a line. And the bottom one measures the gap between the skip lines. In this case, it is also 600 mil. So we will spray a 600 mil line, have a 600 mil gap, spray a 600 mil line, so on and so forth, until we stop spraying. In the case of automatic, this will happen when we press the button and when we press the button. In the case of manual, this will happen when we hold the button and release it. You can always operate the features regardless with the manual function, but in order to use this functionality, the auto system needs to be set up. You'll also notice up here, when we engage both guns are indicated. If we only engage one gun, only one gun will be indicated. If we want to change these lengths, we can do it. And I'll make this, let's say I want a 1 meter line or a 1.5 meter line, and I want a 3 meter gap. Now, when I walk 1.5 meters, it'll spray that line, and then if I keep walking 3 meters, it'll have a gap, then it'll spray another 1.5 meters, so on and so forth. If I know this is going to be something that I'm doing a lot of, I can then set it to either A, B, or C. Holding down the function, you'll see now that this has changed and has been assigned to that. So if I change to B and I have these measurements here, I can always go back to A, which has those measurements we just set, 1.5 and 3. I'll now walk this along and show you that in operation so you can see that as a visual representation. Now we can run over the cleanup. So you can see that we just sprayed these amazing lines, and what we sprayed here was one solid line and then one skip line. So gun 1 was solid, gun 2 was a skip, and we had a 1.5 meter line with a 1 meter gap, and that just repeats as long as we want it to. I also had it on automatic, so I press it once, it comes on, and then when I'm finished or I'm at the end of where I want to be, I press it again and it shuts off. Again, you can change that to the manual function, so you hold it, and then when you release it, it'll start and stop. Or you can just use this manual trigger here. So let's run through the cleanup process and how we're going to do that. I'm finished for the day and I want to clean up. Take out the paint tin and I'm going to swap it with a fresh clean pail of water. I'm going to run through the startup process again with the suction tube in the fresh water and the drain tube in the paint. So that way I can cycle it through and recover the paint that is still in the line. I'm also going to do that for the guns. I'm going to take off the tip guards in the guns with a very, very low pressure. I'm going to hold these guns into the paint and cycle it through. So that way all the paint in the hose lines also gets saved. We don't want any wastage here. And then I'm just going to run through and flush the unit with water until it's clear out the guns and it's clear out the drain tube. This might take around 15 to 20 minutes and may require a few different drums of water. Once the unit's been flushed thoroughly and you've relieved the pressure from the unit, we're going to want to take out the tip guards and the tips and also the filter and the strainer, and we're going to want to clean those separately. Why we need to do that is because the filter is designed to capture debris. So even after you've flushed it out clear, this will still hold debris and some paint residue in it as it captures it. If you let this build up and you don't clean it out, it will build up and it will dry out and you'll end up getting blockages and having to replace the filters. I'll show you what that looks like now. Make sure that we have no pressure on the dial and that we've evacuated pressure. There's no pressure in the guns, and I've closed my valve, unscrewing the manifold cap. I will see a filter. This does come off, and using a bottle brush, just cleaning on the inside here. This is a yellow 50 mesh filter and is what's recommended for your line marking paints. These come in a few different colors and mesh types. You've got black, which is 60 mesh, and you've got blue, which is 100 mesh. Typically, you'll only be using your 50 mesh yellow filter. Now that that's all clean, we can reinstall it, and we can also get that strainer. On the end of your suction tube, this is what's referred to as your strainer. This will be hand tight, and you can unscrew this and then clean it out separately. If this is built up with dry paint, you're not going to be able to suck any paint into the line, and you're going to have really poor performance and cavitation issues. Also, as a safety precaution, release that air. So you finished flushing, you've flushed through the tips, you've flushed through the guns, there's no paint in the line, it's all clear, you've taken out your filter, you've taken out your strainer. Now we're going to take out the tips and the tip guards. Tips out, one seal out using the pointy bit, and we're just going to give these a nice clean in a fresh bucket of water, just rinse them out, and then we can reinstall them and they're good for the next use. Now that we've flushed the unit out, if we're going to be storing the unit, we'll also want to ensure that we've got pump armor stored in the unit. It's the blue liquid, and we're just going to pour a little bit of it into our bucket and make sure that we prime that through the line. Doesn't need to go through the spray lines, just prime it in the pump with the prime valve in the down position, and that's going to ensure that our pump packing stays nice and lubricated and doesn't corrode. Lastly, a little bit of maintenance and troubleshooting. When it comes to maintenance, the key things to note are the motor, the hydraulic motor, the hydraulic pump, and also the piston pump. You've also got the guns to note as well. Tips, filters, they're all wearable and consumable items, but so are pump packings, needles, air filters, and also fluids, such as engine oil and hydraulic oil. We have a very clever maintenance guide which we include. We'll send through to you. Troubleshooting. If you're having some issues priming the unit, make sure that you've reset the unit, that you've got it in the prime position, and that you're priming it through nice and slow. Give the pump a couple of light taps with the mallet on the bottom section right here. Just a couple of light taps while priming will ensure that the ball is seated correctly and free flowing. On hot days, it is likely that paint skin will build here and it will get stuck. So if you're not using the unit and it gets stuck and you stop spraying and it won't spray again, prime, a couple of light taps on this section, and that should get going again. Amazing stuff, guys. Well, thanks again for your purchase. If you have any questions or you need any information, be sure to reach out. If it's troubleshooting or if it's any consumable items, just let us know.